Podcast with hosts Andrew Clark and Chris Emery. This is designed to be a discussion on all things life and faith. We hope this serves as a weekly resource and encouragement to you.
What's going on, everybody? This is your host, Andrew, back with another episode of the Bayview Podcast, joined as always by Pastor Chris Emery.
Why you had a smirk on your face at the very beginning of that? Like you're about, I could tell you wanted to laugh before we ever said a word. Because
I don't think I've ever referred to you as Pastor Chris
You're
Emery.
You're just happy. Like,
I was going to say, there was a hesitation there. I was like, oh,
I know, like, where are we going with this?
Not your pastor?
Hey, good to be with you, Bayview Podcast listeners. Hey, we're super excited to have back in the studio with us a familiar voice, familiar face to those of you that call Bayview home. We got Rachael Jenneman in the house. So welcome, Rachael.
Thanks.
So
I love
awesome.
to talk, so this is fun.
Oh, perfect. Good. We're just going to sit back and drink coffee and let you roll with it.
Yeah.
Love it.
So what we've been doing with these last several weeks is we've been using the podcast as kind of a follow-up to what we talked about the previous week. If you go to Bayview and attend, you know we've been going through the Beatitudes, talking about the whole upside-down nature of what these statements from Jesus meant and the challenge that everything he is talking about goes against the grain of the social norm, the business as usual mentality. And so it's just been a good thing for these times to come back here and just say, hey, we talked about this Sunday, but man, there's always more.
Mm-hmm.
Let's go a little deeper. Let's have that conversation. And so if you're listening and maybe you're new to the podcast, we don't have a whole lot of scripts. We don't have prep. This is really meant to be a dialogue, a conversation about things of faith, things of life, and hopefully through the middle of your week, just a moment of encouragement, resource, because we're all doing this thing together.
Mm-hmm.
And so super happy to have you with us. So that being said, Rachael, you knocked it out of the park this last week. You brought an awesome message about this next Beatitude, which we find in Matthew 5, verse 6. And basically, God blesses those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. I know translations use different words.
Mm-hmm.
Some of them will say, for those who hunger and thirst for justice, for they will be fulfilled. Some of those words are interchangeable. Sometimes a smaller word is used where a bigger word is there. But anyway, we're going to break that down.
Mm-hmm.
So gut check or first gut reactions. What do you see? What vibe do you get out of that beatitude right out of the gate? Where'd you take us on Sunday? Go ahead, Rachel.
Okay, so I mentioned this on Sunday, but when I hear the word righteousness, it actually has a negative connotation to me. Because for so long, I think Christians have been called self-righteous or holier than thou. So when I hear that word that I need to be more righteous, automatically I want to put up a wall.
Interesting.
And go, oh, no. I don't want to be necessarily seen as righteous because I don't want, whether it's unbelievers or my friends or my family or even other Christians, to think, well, I'm just better than you.
Interesting. So break that down, because that's a great thing to understand, because we so easily can get caught up in this moment of talking inside church talk. So even though you didn't grow up in it, Andrew and I did grow up in it, but now all three of us, we live, eat, drink, and sleep it every day.
Right.
We work inside the Christian bubble, and so it's easy for us to say things and be like, yeah, we know what that means, but our listeners don't. They may not live in that bubble. So there is a incredible vast difference between righteousness and self-righteousness.
Right.
Break that down. How would you say for the listener?
For sure. So self-righteousness is more about legalism, pride, and it's about me. And how am I better than you? Which, of course, is pride. Where righteousness that Jesus is talking about in the Beatitudes, it is more about be holy as God is holy, which is what you'll find that verse in Leviticus, it's in Leviticus. Peter references Leviticus saying that be holy as I am holy. That's a whole lot different. That is a holiness of humility and serving others. A whole lot different than self-righteousness where you're about pride and me,
100%.
me, me.
Yeah.
100%.
Because it's really hard to not hear the word righteous. And to your point, I instantly picture like my great grandmother or like someone who's, and there's the complete opposite here. I love my great grandmother, or someone who's like fake. Like there's only, because it's like it is more in the self-righteous category. It is, I'm trying to prove how good I am.
Right.
And it's like, that's such a missed thing. Even when we're talking about the word righteousness, where even a lot of scripture talks about it's Christ's righteousness in us anyways.
Yeah.
And so that it kind of removes the me part of it.
And it's funny you said that you think of your great grandmother. When I hear the word righteous, I don't think of Billy Graham. I think of that little blue-haired old lady that's like, hey, you're in my seat. This is the seat I sit in every Sunday.
Exactly.
You know, that's what I think about. And how do we switch our minds to say, oh no, if I'm going to be righteous, it means I'm going to be holy as God is holy.
And I think that is a really important thing for us all of us as followers, disciples, to grasp. And it always helps me to get the kind of the layman's breakdown, the dumb man's breakdown behind some of these words. Yeah. And so, you've probably heard me say this on Sundays a lot. The word righteousness can be simplified into right in the eyes of God. So something that is righteous, it's always going to be right in his view. The word holy at its core literally means to be set apart. And so now you have these things. I love that you brought in Leviticus, because I love the book of Leviticus. And
you don't hear that every day.
Well, the entire theme is be holy because I'm holy.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of times that book feels like, man, it's just a bunch of rules and laws. And yes, it's got a fair share of ceremonial laws that are no longer relevant. But there's so many moral and godly laws that are still relevant. And he's saying, listen, I'm going to help you be holy, be set apart from the world, because I'm not part of this world. And now we have Jesus backing it up with really the Beatitudes are 8 statements of holiness. Here's 8 more ways to be holy. And 8 more ways. And you're righteous. You're right in the eyes of God. And I think when we hear the word self-righteous, what we're doing is saying this, like, because of me, because of how great I am, because of the good I've done, because of what I've given, because of what I've accomplished, I am right in the eyes of God. That's the self-righteousness, and that's what Jesus is talking about in Luke 18 when he's got the story of the Pharisee and the tax collector. And the Pharisee is like, oh, I'm so happy that I am not like that dirty, filthy tax collector over there. I give and I tithe and I serve, and modern version would be I attend church every Sunday. I sit on the board. I do all these great things, and man, I'm just so glad I'm so holy. That's self-righteousness. And God's like, yeah, that means nothing to me.
But see, here's the thing. When we as modern-day Christians say, well, I don't want to look self-righteous, I don't want that label, we say, okay, I still want to be a Christian, but I'm not going to go all in. And we allow little compromises in our life, or what I would like to call little white sins, not necessarily little white lies. And then when we do that, we actually end up becoming more self-righteous, the very thing that we're trying to avoid, because we start thinking, well, I'm better than everybody else.
Because I'm not as religious as they are.
Yes.
That's interesting. Yeah. That's a totally different version of self-righteousness. I don't go to church every week, and I don't do all your stupid little Bible studies. I'm the one that I don't have to go to church to be a Christian. Yeah. It's a totally different version of self-righteousness.
But to me, that's self-righteous.
That's interesting. Yeah. Wow.
You're like constantly just trying to justify.
Yeah.
Like how you're better, how you're doing. Okay.
Well, it's put in the spotlight. Like you said it earlier, it's all about you.
Yeah.
And righteousness is never about us.
Well, and I've always been a firm believer, the more you move up into leadership, the more you have to give up. And because we don't want to lead down people a path that they're not supposed to go down. And so it's a struggle for me sometimes. And this is the warning I have to give people. If you want to be holy as God is holy, you're going to have some moments of isolation, and you're going to have some moments of loneliness, because not everybody wants, even Christians want to be holy as God is holy.
Absolutely.
So there are certain things that I'm going to give up that maybe other Christians aren't giving up. And it may be like there's certain TV shows that people watch that they talk about all the time, and I choose not to watch them. Not because I'm better than anybody else. It's just I know that God is not wanting me to watch those, or there's just certain things that I don't partake in, because as a Christian leader, moving further and further up in leadership, I have to give up some things in order to be more holy as God is holy. Again, not because I'm better than anybody else, but so I can be more like Jesus and lead more people to Jesus.
Well, but what you're saying is beautiful, and it's straight in line with Jesus' teaching. Following Jesus involves heavy sacrifice. Sacrifice is part of our growth. Sacrifice is part of our maturing, part of our sanctification. That's another big word that I know that, I try not to use a lot of the shun words because they can kind of muddy the waters.
I like
but,
that shun words.
It's basically like, sanctification is like, hey, it's God's continued work in me.
Yes.
We are always being worked on.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm pursuing Jesus, then that work is never done, but there's work happening, which means I hope I'm different now than I was 10 years ago because God's been doing a whole lot of work. It's kind of like I'm a fixer-upper. And, some of you maybe live in a house, it's, you bought it as a fixer-upper. And my understanding is that the older the house, it's never done. Like if you bought an old farmhouse as a fixer-upper, you're never done fixing her up.
Yep.
And so that's kind of sanctification. It's like it's God doing his work on you. But there is that line, and maybe what you're getting at between self-righteous and righteous and why we run from that word is what's our motive? What's the motive behind what I'm doing or why I would do these things? It's duty versus desire. I've said it before in messages. It's the so that versus the because of. Religion says I'm going to do these things so that God loves me, I've forgiven, I don't feel guilty, I get to heaven. There's all the so that's, which makes us the cause. But the gospel says it's all a because of God's love, because of his forgiveness, because while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us, because all this happened. Now my life is because of that. I want to honor you with my life. I want to grow closer to you. I want you to come in and help me reveal things that shouldn't be there. I want to become more righteous. I want my life to be right in your eyes because you loved me first.
Right.
Yeah. And now that to me, that's always been the tension point between religion and relationship. Yeah. And so, I mean, I don't know how that then so, how does that tie in then to this? So this is saying like, all right, so blessed are those that they hunger and thirst for righteousness. So, that's a positive word in this light. What does that look like? If you're listening today and you're like, well, how do I hunger and thirst for that? What does that look like to you guys?
You want to go first?
The only thing I was thinking about there, just with what you're saying real quick, and it's not quite on your question. I'll let Rachel handle that, but it is just the thought of there's a trust factor there, and I feel like when you do things so that, it's because you don't fully trust what's happened. So it's like that idea of I'm going to do this so that God will love me more. Well, are you really trusting his love in the first place? And I think that's the balance that then we've been talking about, this Beatitudes, is we do these things because he loved us. That is hopefully going to push you in the direction of wanting to be more right in his eyes because you know how much and you trust how much he loves you.
But that's how some people have been conditioned.
Yeah.
If I do X, Y, and Z, my dad will love me more. My mom will love me more. My spouse will love me more. And so now you have to translate. You just subconsciously you translate that to the Lord and say, 100%. Okay, because this is how I've been wired for so many years, I've got to do it this way.
Yeah.
And it's hard to make that switch and say, oh, I can't earn God's love anymore because he already paid the price with the son. Like, there's nothing more that I can do.
Well, it's against the grain of our entire social structure. So everything in our society is that same linear thing. It's punishment reward. So you obey mom and dad, you get maybe an allowance. You disobey mom and dad, you get punished. You go to school and study, you get good grades. You don't study, you get bad grades. You go to work and do your job, you get paid. You don't do your job, you get... Our entire existence is based on works-based stuff. So, I mean, now we have this one relationship where we somehow have to flip it on its head and accept it under completely different terms, of which will never fly in the world in our earthly relationships. It's hard, and it keeps wanting to creep back in. I mean, I've been a Christian for a long time. We've all been followers of Jesus for a long time. It still creeps in. Yeah. There's still times where like, man, I was a really good pastor this week. I killed it. I pastored the heck out of that week. I know God loves me so much more right now, right? Or there's other times like, wow, that was a week of fail. Like day after day, God must be so not happy and disappointed. And it's like, we just keep wanting to do that. And it just changes our relationship with him so much. Yeah.
It reminds me, do you go ahead?
No, that's just, I think is right there. And I think that's, to your point, it's so much, obviously in this situation, so much easier said than done, but that's almost what we're battling now is is that, again, this beatitude idea of it being flipped upside down.
Mm-hmm.
You can't follow Jesus the same way the world would want you to follow him.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Oh no, it's kind of a little off topic, but it just reminds me of the story. Mike Donahue, who used to be a part of 10th Avenue North, I think it was like back in 2010, they won a Dove Award, and so he got up to accept his Dove Award, and he's giving this very super spiritual speech on why, like, thanking Jesus that like he got this award, but in his mind he's like, I worship God the best. Like, we got this award, we worship. And then as he is exiting the stage, his Dove Award breaks. Like, it just falls apart. And he was so mad, like, who used up all the glue? Like, whatever. And then as the backstage crew is leading him to the green room, one of the backstage ladies goes, hey, I just want to let you know that song that you just won an award for. That song I heard it for the first time, and that's when I knew God loved me. I didn't know that God loved me until I heard that song. And then it was just humility. And he kept that Dove Award broken. He never got it fixed because it was, it's not about our righteousness and how well we can do things. And awards are great, but it's really not an indication of how awesome we have done.
Yeah.
So it changes in what we're pursuing, because this is a very pursuit-driven beatitude. Yeah. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst. So we hunger, we thirst. Why would Jesus choose that verbiage? I don't want to, it doesn't have to be exactly where you took a Sunday, but break that down. Like, why would Jesus use that? How do we relate to that?
Well, what happens when we're hungry? Our stomach lets us know, and it's in pain. And if we don't eat, then we get a headache. Mm-hmm. And the head says, you still haven't eaten yet. You need to fill yourself up. And that's when we're hungry. That's a constant thing. We're hungry every single day. There has never been a day that has gone by that I was not thirsty for a drink, that I wasn't hungry for food. Mm-hmm. And so to have that constant every day, it would be one thing if it was like, hey, I don't know, make sure you go to church every Sunday. Okay, that's one day a week. Hunger is all the time.
Ooh,
for me, it's like every other minute. But I mean, it's just the way it is. And then get filled. What do you get filled with? When you abide in Christ. So we're always trying to fill ourselves with something.
Yeah.
And I mentioned this on Sunday where Jesus meets the woman at the well. What does he tell her? He says, hey, I'm going to give you water that you will never thirst again. Well, it's not that she would never thirst again. It's that she would never thirst again for the things of this world, that he would constantly fill her.
Yeah. He's what satisfies.
He's what satisfies. He's what's, because you've got the different versions. You've got some versions say filled, some say satisfied. Well, you need both. When I eat specific types of food, my stomach may be filled, but that doesn't mean I'm satisfied. Right. Man, when I have brownies, I'm still full, but I still am craving more. Mm-hmm. So when Jesus says, hey, I'm going to give you water, you're never going to thirst again. Yeah, she's going to thirst. She's just going to thirst for him. But not only will that quench her thirst, she'll be satisfied. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, that's good. The daily connection that, we hunger and we thirst every single day. That's it. I know for me, when, if I reach a point, which I'm like you, Rachel, I very rarely reach this point because I just eat all the time. But the moments where maybe I'm not able to, if I get really hungry, it's amazing how everything else becomes blurry.
Yes.
I literally become tunnel vision on, I've got to get some food. It's all I can think about. Like, I can't make decisions. I can't think rationally. I can't do relationship. Like, it's just like, no, until I get something in my belly, nothing else matters. Same thing with being thirsty. I don't remember it too many times in my life of just being like on the edge of death, thirsty. But when that happens, nothing else is going to distract you. You are on a laser-focused mission to get some level of sustenance.
And you're irritable.
Oh,
and
big
all
time.
That would cure that is if you just got some food. How many times have you said to someone, I know I've said it, man, when was the last time you spent some time with Jesus? Like, because you're just really irritable right now. If you just go and spend a little time with Jesus, I think you would... you would be a little bit more righteous right now.
Spiritually hangry. Like I get hangry. Like my wife knows when I'm hangry. It happened last night. We were making dinner last night together, and we do that. We love that in the evenings because I love to cook and love it when we're there together. And I thought I'd made enough food for everyone that's going to be at dinner, and she's like, "No, we got to do some more." Oh, I didn't like that answer. I was not okay with that answer. Nothing to do with doing more work or that she was wrong. She was actually incredibly spot on right, as she is most of the time. But I was hangry. I don't want, what I was really trying to say is, I don't want to cook anymore because I just want to sit down and eat.
Yeah.
I don't want to cook. I need to eat. And I think when we look at it at that extreme level, that's what Jesus is saying. Like, listen, blessed are those who nothing else matters more than getting more of me.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing else matters more than that hunger and thirst.
Yeah.
And it is interesting. I love that you tied the dot or connected those dots on Sunday of the woman at the well, and he uses the thought of hunger and thirst, bread of life, everlasting fountain. He uses these. He knows.
Be salty so other people will thirst.
Yeah. We're people, and he knows. He knows how to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
He knows that food and stuff mattered back then. So absolutely.
Even his miracles involve food. Look at the 5 loaves and the fishes and loaves.
He gets it. It is like the woman at the well is such an interesting story because of how initially confused she is when he starts using that language of like, you drink, this is the water of life, the spirit of life, that kind of stuff, and she's just like, what is this guy saying?
You don't have a bucket.
Yeah, what is happening here?
Better than Jacob.
And the best part about her though is when she actually understands, receives it. I mean, she wants to go tell everyone.
Yeah.
And like the same idea what we're saying, like when you eat, like your spirits are up, like she grasps the concept and really accepts who Jesus is trying to say he is, and her spirits are up, and she goes and it becomes this essentially missionary back to her city in some ways, and just the almost the overflow that happens. And I think that's where a lot of times when I read that story, that's what I see is that it's hard to do things, and it's hard to maybe, especially in the realm we work in with sharing Christ, being about Christ, if our cups aren't being filled up as well. And I feel like what we're seeing there is that idea of hunger and thirst is you want your cup overflowing so that there is something to actually pour out. And it's the same thing for any of us as believers, that there be more to your life than just, I did church on Sunday or once a Sunday. Like it's actually be this weekly, daily, like it would be who you are. So
I think the key maybe too is with this one, and a direction to look at it is he's being very intentional what you are hungry and thirsting for.
Yeah.
Because the reality is, just like it matters, or applies physically, spiritually, we're going to eat and drink something.
Right.
So it's really the difference here between brownies and junk food, or you can eat something that's really good for you, something that can sustain you. And the junk food is easy. I think that's, it's available. I can pop open a bag of chips a lot easier than cut up a thing of celery and whatever. So, I mean, it's like, hey, you're going to eat and drink something, but man, you are, as you go back to that original core of what the word blessed means, you are fortunate. You are so spiritually successful if you will hunger and thirst for me. And for this encounter with Jesus, for this moment with me, for what God sees as so right in his eyes.
Well, think about when Paul was in prison, the times that he was in prison with different missionaries. And when we look at that word blessed, it means in the original language, it says happy, but it's not the happy that we necessarily think of the outward emotions that have to do with our outward circumstances. It's joy. And yet here is Paul in prison. I don't see anybody being happy about being in prison, but yet there was joy. He was constantly filling himself with Jesus. He was constantly putting others first, preaching the gospel, and yet somehow in prison, he's writing letters going, consider it joy, my brothers. Because he is hungering after Jesus, and he is getting filled, and not just getting filled, but he is satisfied.
Yep. And that's the joy, and that's what he's talking about, is the what we experience going through the valleys and the darkest of times. It's not that we're happy about what happened, but it's almost like in the same vein, man, I'm so fortunate that it is such a horrible time in my life. I get to see God at his best. How cool is this going to be?
Right.
We get to see God come through, because God, at least in my life, I don't know how it is in your life, he doesn't come through guns blazing when things are great. He comes to be what I need him to be when I need him to be that. But some of the darkest things, looking back in my life, some of my low points, some of the times that were the most difficult, man, I look back like, man, God really showed me who he was in those times. And that's where I think Paul is coming from. Like, guys, this is going to be awesome. Like I'm not enjoying being here. No, I don't enjoy being shackled to this wall. This is not comfortable. I would not choose this. but God's going to be amazing.
And you look at the history of missionaries as well as people in the Bible that have a history of, I'm going to be holy as God is holy, and making those sacrifices and giving up certain things. They're the ones that experience the most miracles.
Absolutely. 100%.
They're the ones that someone's trying to martyr them, but they're not feeling the pain. They're in the middle of the fire, but they can't feel the pain, or an angel comes or something. They're the one experiencing the miracles.
How many times have maybe any three of us in counseling or when we're out speaking, I mean, I don't know if you've had these conversations, but there's been times where I've been like, listen, you keep crying out for God to show up more in your life. You're not giving him the opportunity. You keep answering the question for him. You keep trying to do it your way, and you keep trying to put words in his mouth instead of just being quiet, stopping, letting God come through and be God. And that's where some of those missionaries and people of the Bible have shown us so well, is that they give the space for God to come and be like, okay, thank you. And now I'm going to show you who I am.
Yeah, and when you ask God for more, I hate to say it, but part of it is you're asking for some pain. Because in that pain, that's when he shows up. And I hate that, because I hate pain. Yeah. And I hate going through hard times. You can put me through whatever, but if I have to watch it with my kids, or I have to, in other situations, I don't want to experience it, but that's when God shows up.
Absolutely.
So we can't say, God, I want to have more faith, but then not be willing to go through the pain.
So when I say I'm going to hunger and thirst for righteousness, it means I need to be hungry and thirsty for whatever is of God. And sometimes it's going to be like Brussels sprouts. Yeah. I'm not going to enjoy it.
So good. No.
Do you like Brussels? I actually like Brussels sprouts. So anyway, wow. Any last thoughts before we sign off here?
It's good.
Yeah.
Well, hey, Sunday.
It was a good Sunday. I love where we're going with the Beatitudes. I love that we're just diving into these. My prayer, I know our prayer, our hope for all of you listening, is that you're allowing these to truly saturate deep into your daily existence. That was the point of these statements. This radically changes the way you get up and do everyday life, and they build on each other. And so we're going to be right here each and every week, breaking these down for the next several weeks. Still, we're only on number 4, right? It was just halfway through.
Yeah, but I say it's number 4. Yes,
halfway through. So we're still going to keep going. Hope this has been a place of encouragement, of a resource for you. We certainly appreciate you spending time with us here today. If you've not done so, click subscribe at the bottom of whatever platform you're listening on. We are available on all the major platforms, but that way you never miss an episode. And we will be right back here next week, same time, same place. This is Rachel, Andrew, and Chris. Thank you for being with us on the Bayview Podcast, and we'll see you next time around.